You are listening to Yogapodcasten, my episode number 4 in English. I am Maria Gulager and I am a human in ongoing personal transformation. Today I'm talking to a neuroscientist who knows just about everything there is to know about this brilliant brain of ours. So I decided to ask him, just about everything I could think of. We were challenged in terms of finding a quiet spot, but you'll hear all of that walking as well. I truly hope you enjoy this episode. The show today is about the brilliant brain, and this first part is actually by a Skype line, a bit of a reconstruction of an interview we did in Too Much Wind when my guest, Dr. Fred Travis, was in Denmark last week. So welcome, Dr. Fred Travis.
It's great to be able to Skype with you, Maria.
And you are director of the Center for Brain, Consciousness and Cognition in... Can you pronounce the name of your university, please?
The university is Maharishi University of Management. It's in Fairfield, Iowa, United States.
All right. So what I will do is ask you what happens in this brilliant brain when this and that happens. And my first question is about love. So what happens in our brilliant brain when we become so madly in love, and it just feels like we are losing a bit of ourselves in a way? What is that in the brain?
Yeah, this is a very important question for people to understand, because it's a and the natural response is we always respond in two ways whenever we see anyone. One is the part that activates the emotional parts of the brain. It's what gives us a global evaluation. What's the overall feeling?
Yeah.
And the other is which constructs the individual experience we're having. So we see someone, and due to some pattern of how they act, how they stand, how they interact, how they look at you, it activates this emotional response. It's unconscious, it's automatic. And what you're responding to a pattern that in the past had been very useful for you. So this strong emotional sense comes to the front of the brain, and what it does, it overrides the rational thinker, because that emotional response is so very strong.
Absolutely, it's not very rational.
And some people feel this is bad and shouldn't they be in control?
Yeah.
But the reality is this emotional response is always the first response in any situation. It's always coloring what we eventually see. Just some research, they had people lying in a scanner, and these were very strong sports fanatics, and they showed them a video. And on the video, someone made an error during the competition. Yeah. And if the person thought that this was their own team, the part of the brain that became active was the part of the brain that's empathy, and you feel for the person, and you think, the ball took a bad hop, and so on. Right. The official part of the brain is called the insula. The insula is a very old part of the brain. What it does, it takes bodily feelings, it connects them with social feelings. Now, if they saw this video and that the team that was making the error was the opposite team, the part of the brain that became active was their pleasure circuit. That she became happy. Yeah. So you see the difference. The emotion is first, and then you think within that emotional curtain, that emotional feeling. Now, why is this there? Because to connect with an individual that you want to spend the rest of your life with, your rational brain could never consider all the possible facts and all the possible actions and reactions and how your significant other will react in different situations. That's where the emotion comes in. You just, on a very deep level, you recognize common values, common priorities, and that's why this strong feeling of love takes over.
But so what happens when that love is not mutual, and you actually fall more in love with this person when you become rejected? What is that in the brain? Because that's weird.
Yeah, that is weird.
It's not very brilliant.
Yeah. What it is, it's a dysfunctional coping mechanism. So due to something in your past, the way that you coped was actually overlooking abuse or neglect or lack of companionship. And you coped with it by actually saying, well, no, the person actually loves me even more. It's a dysfunctional coping which is coming in there. And this is where, when we talk about how we're dynamically changing the brain is a self-adapting organ. 70% of your brain connections change every day. Wow. And so if it's in trauma, brain connections change so you can adapt to traumatic experience. But what you can also do is choose positive life-supporting experiences, and these will also change the brain.
Life-supporting.
And what these will do is allow life-supporting. It's code for anything which allows you to grow.
Great.
So it could be a good night's sleep. It could be exercise. It could be practicing yoga practice, asanas. It could be meditation practice. Anything which allows you to grow and become more in tune with who you are deep inside.
Right.
What this will do is it's going to transform this emotional response. It'll transform it so it'll be more in terms of what will allow you to continue to grow. So we're in this transition time where most of our automatic responses have been programmed by dysfunction and neglect and stress and so on. And so people say, I can't trust my emotions.
Yeah.
My emotions are, always wrong. They leave me in the wrong place.
Yeah.
I have to go by my rational intellect. What they're recognizing is not that the system, this emotional response, which is a global evaluation of the world, but the recognizing is not that that's bad, but how they programmed it in the past is bad.
Right.
So you take control by choosing good food, good sleep, good exercise, yoga asanas, meditation. And then what you're able to do is this automatic response will begin to reflect more what is the appropriate thing to do.
Yeah. And the appropriate feeling, actually.
Exactly. And by appropriate feeling, you mean the feeling which does allow you to continue to grow and expand in your life.
Yeah, so you don't get confused to feel attracted to someone who rejects you.
Yeah, what a horrible thing.
Yeah, actually.
And the worst thing is if you continue to go towards that person. But the key thing is don't in the English there's a thing, don't get down on yourself for doing it.
Yeah.
Don't be angry at yourself or disappointed in yourself.
Yeah.
Just recognize, this is just this dysfunctional coping mechanism.
Yeah.
I have to start choosing other things, and this coping mechanism will go away.
Yeah, so becoming more aware of your patterns, and so you're actually putting another layer to it if you become disappointed in the disappointment somehow, like.
Exactly.
It makes it worse.
It makes it just even stronger.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So what happens in the brilliant brain when we lose our minds? It's kind of related to this, but it could be in another situation as well. When we say that it felt like I lost my mind there. That feeling of not being in control. What is that?
Yeah. What there is so this is a second understanding of how the brain functions. There's two things simultaneously going on. One is the content coming in. And we just talked about how we relate to content with this emotional response and then the rational response.
Yeah.
But there's something else, and that is we're awake. And some people will say, well, of course we're awake. Yeah. But there's actually two parallel circuits that are going on through the core of the brain. The core of the brain is called the thalamus. That's the switchboard of the brain. And what is happening is one of the groups of nuclei are responsible for the content, so the actual what we see, what we hear, what we touch, what we taste. The other groups of nuclei actually respond to how awake we are, how alert we are, subjective awareness. When we so-called lose our mind, what happened is we've completely identified with the ongoing content that's going in, and this background level of wakefulness is we've lost. Now, why have we done that? The experience could be very strong, and therefore the sense of self is completely identified with the ongoing experience. You needed to have maximum attention on what's going on. And this is one thing that meditation procedures, especially meditations that allow you to transcend, such as transcendental meditation, what you do is you decrease content and you strengthen the wakefulness circuits. So that sense of inner being of the self is becoming stronger and stronger and stronger by transcending many times. And so you get less, you lose yourself in experience less and less. Because that underlying field of silence is becoming stronger and fuller. And what that's doing, it's giving you a solid backdrop to, it's giving you a solid anchor in any experience. You never get lost to yourself. You never get completely overwhelmed by the ongoing experience. So why does it happen? It's just a matter of, have you chosen experiences that allow you to transcend, to strengthen those wakefulness circuits?
So it's kind of training the brain not to get lost.
It is. And it's doing that by transcending, by letting everything go, and strengthening those circuits, those underlying wakefulness circuits. So what happens? You feel just more settled, more even, less lost in any experience as you meditate.
And is it quite paradoxical that you have to let go in order for things to happen the right way?
It is.
Yeah. So our conscious mind can do one thing, and our subconscious mind is a whole other level.
Yes, and what you want to do is integrate those two.
Mm.
What you want to do is allow the input from the subconscious mind to have easy access to the conscious mind, and vice versa.
Yeah.
It's like a pointed hole. What we're talking about, the point value is the things that we experience and we can express. The whole value is that value of silence, of self, of wakefulness itself. And you want to be able to move back and forth between those. So you take the specific value, you put it into this fuller understanding of who you are, and you take this fuller understanding of who you are, and you can express it in daily activity.
Will you say we are not our brains? We are actually our consciousness? Can you say, do you know what I mean? Like, are we our brains?
Exactly. I don't think we are our brains. We are consciousness. And what we do is we interact with the brain. The brain is the interface between who we are and the outside world. So we get information from the outside world. It comes into the senses. We get a ringing over the brain. It's a ringing in the brain that lets us know, consciousness know what's out there. And then when we want to respond, again, we interact with the brain. So I see the brain as an interface, which is allowing us to work in the world. And maybe just an analogy for this, that sun shines everywhere the same, but it's reflected everywhere differently. In this analogy, the sun is a universal field of consciousness. It's not property of any individual person, any individual experience. It's a fundamental field of liveliness, of self-referral. It always relates things back to itself, back to wholeness. And so the sun shines off of reflectors. In this analogy, the reflectors are our brain and our body. And the reflection in the reflectors is individual consciousness, individual awareness. So who we are is part of us is relative changing. It's our body, it's our brain, it's how we learn, and we learn by changing the brain. Part of us is something which is absolute. That is, it's the sun, it's this universal field of consciousness. And it's these two coming together which create the reflection, create our ongoing story of our life.
Yeah, because that is difficult to understand. If we all have similar brains with some general functions to it, then how come we are so different in personalities?
Yes, it's because the brain structures generally are the same, but the details are completely different. Men and women, completely different. Kids, teenagers, adults, completely different just in terms of brain structure. And then once you're an adult, it's the experiences that we attend to which create different connections in the brain. And so we're constantly molding our brain. If we listen to podcasts on yoga or computer science or medicine, we're actually transforming the circuits. We're transforming what's important to us.
Yeah.
So it's definitely our individuality is in the reflector. It's in the brain and body. But that which is common to all of us is this fundamental underlying field of consciousness.
Dr. Fred Travis, I think this is where we got interrupted. Some people were speaking, and that was actually good, because then we went ahead and found someone where we could actually speak and get a good recording live when we were together. I'll carry on. Okay. So I found a YouTube clip where you say you are in control and you create your own reality, and that is, that speaks right to me, because at the moment I'm trying to manifest, but I haven't figured it out yet. So what do you mean by you create your reality, and how does that look in the brain?
This is a real important point.
Yeah.
First, the way you manifest is you don't have to do anything. It's how the brain is set up. Your brain is a self-adapting organ. So when people listen to their podcasts, what's happening is information is coming into the ears, and you're giving them new ideas, new ways to look at the world.
Yeah.
To do that, new brain circuits are being used. In the brain, very simply, when you use brain circuits, they get fed. They get tropic hormone. Those circuits begin to become stronger. So what is literally happening is the experiences you choose for today are creating your brain tomorrow. So it's what's constantly happening. And so when you want to manifest something, all that means is you have a desire of what you want, and you start moving in that direction. And at first so you want to head north.
Yeah.
So first you might you're facing south, and you might start heading west. Well, it's not perfectly right, but at least you're getting back towards there. And so the whole key thing is be aware. What's the response to what I'm doing? And this is taking up another concept. There's a concept in Vedic science called dharma, D-H-A-R-M-A.
Yeah.
And dharma is that activity which supports your evolution, allows you to grow, allows you to realize all of your inner talents. And the way dharma works is when you go in a direction which allows you to grow, you feel happy. In the Vedic scriptures, it talks about you feel a warmth when you're doing what you have to do. So that's what is so important, is don't get too lost sitting in your chair. Do I want to do this? Do I want to go there? Do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? And it's analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
What you want to do is look at the big picture, think it through, and then take a step. Just be very simple.
Just do something.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then be alert. What is the response?
Yeah.
And then you can start going. And so that's how we manifest anything. We actually manifest by doing. Now, what can help this is, where is the mind coming from? Where is the thoughts coming from? Where are the thoughts coming from? If they're coming just from our local level of experience, they're going to be limited.
Where should they come from otherwise? Where else can they come from?
From pure consciousness, from the very silent source of the mind. That's where the thoughts are coming from. When you have a creative idea, that's the thought that's just coming from pure consciousness. And that creative idea is qualitatively different. It's usually more quiet. It's usually whole. It's usually, you feel very still when you think about it. Because it's actually a complete thought and idea that's coming up from inner silence. And then as it becomes more and more expressed, and then it gets affected by memories and desires and things. And this is how negative thoughts can rise in the mind. They may come from a very positive desire for growth. And it could be you want to get some food for your family. And there's just really a desire to feed the family. Yeah. And then you're going and you see a garden. Yeah. And you think, oh, I want some food for my family. You jump over the fence, you steal the food. Yeah. And exactly. And what this is as the desire comes up, all the other things are beginning to color. So what we want to do is be able to explore the full range of the mind. That's what happens in transcendental meditation. You go from active to less active, completely silent, and then a little bit more active and active again. You're exploring the full range of the mind, so when you want to use the mind, you're able to pick up a thought at that quiet level. And also because you're more familiar and quiet with that silent level of the mind, you can pick up that thought and innocently put it into practice. So it's not as though there's any magic materializing things. It's just trying to culture the thought so that you can pick up the thought in the form where it's fullest and purest, and then just acting and see the response, and acting and see the response.
It makes sense, but I've had those creative ideas. I get a lot of ideas, okay? I get a lot of ideas, and you're right. Some of them, to me, it feels whole. I'm not sure, if it comes from pure awareness. Who am I to say? But it feels amazing. But then I can lose confidence if I don't see results. If I don't see people signing up, for example. If I don't see that it's possible at the moment. Can it be from that place of pure awareness, but just be premature somehow? Yeah.
That was a good insight. It could be premature. Yeah. And it's so good to live life without too much intellectualization. Because what happens is, remember the low road, high road? Where the initial response hits the emotional response. That's really the whole structure we're talking about. When you get a creative idea, it's coming from the low road. It's broad. It's responding to patterns rather than specific things. What can mess things up is your intellect. Oh, yeah, but no, it's not what I want. And so what you need to do is live simply. You just, when you have an idea, think, okay, does this idea first seem reasonable? It's not going to hurt anyone. Put it into practice. You use the intellect to decide how to do what your creative idea has done. And then you let go. Because the fulfillment of the idea is done by the support of the world of nature around you. If the world needs this podcast, you'll be able to find time to talk with me, it'll come out nice, and it'll be done. And it'll be done in a seemingly effortless way. Doesn't mean that you don't have to drive down here and we have to walk and find a quiet place. But it's effortless in that you just, I need to do this, and then it happens. I need to do this, and it happens.
Great. And so if you get inspired, sometimes you forget your ideas. That's one of my questions as well, that sometimes you get really good ideas, and then they're gone, because you didn't write them down. What is that?
Again, there's this vertical level of the mind. And just think of your own very creative ideas. When they come up, they're quiet. They're not. There's not a band and lights and everything. Okay, this is the greatest thing. It's completely whole, and you feel full at the same time. You feel silent and complete, and also happy because yes, this is good. Yeah, exactly. And this is at the very quietest level of the mind. If you don't write it down, when you're involved in all of the details of the day-to-day, your mind's at the surface, and it doesn't have access to that quiet level. And the harder you try to get it, the further away it's going to go.
It's just gone,
So know that this is what's happening, and don't force the mind. Just if you can't get something, go on. And what will happen is it'll come to the level of the thinking mind, and you'll have it.
Well, hopefully.
Well, I guarantee it.
Okay, another question for the brilliant brain, which, by the way, sometimes it feels it's not so brilliant. This is your term, brilliant brain. For example, it doesn't feel so brilliant when I get nervous. I met you the other day at a lecture, and I saw my fellow podcaster, and I must say idol, Peter Lund Madsen, who's there also a neuroscientist, brain scientist. And I saw him only from behind. He had this longer hair than I remembered. But and I wanted to, I didn't even see him in front, I wanted to ask him something afterwards, but I didn't dare to. I saw these security guys, maybe it was beside him. And so what is that? What happens when I freeze and don't do what I want?
It's the low road response. It always happens. So you go up, and you described it so well. You didn't even see him in detail. It was just, there was this picture. He's my idol. Yeah. And then the response that comes up is, I'm just beginning, and you think of mistakes you made, and like that. And so I think the low road response is important. As we said before, that's where you get your creative ideas. The way to deal with these type of low road responses is you need to transcend. You need to reprogram the low road response. Because what in there now is the fruit of everything you've done. And that's the fruit of being a student and working really hard, sometimes getting good grades, sometimes not getting good grades. All of that is stored in how you respond every time you come up to do an audio.
Yeah.
So you want to get rid of that.
Yeah.
And the way to get rid of that is, one, do lots of successful shoots. Another way to do that is to transcend. And what that does is it adds a different quality to the low road response. And specifically, it adds a quality where you are whole and complete. You have all of the resources you need to be and do anything you want.
And that is also when you don't meditate, that transcendentation. That is also when I'm in that situation, I meet someone I fancy and I want to talk to him, and I feel, then I won't feel nervous. Will I not feel nervous then?
What you'll do is, yes, you'll feel nervous, but it won't take away, it won't give that edge of being stressful. Okay. Because you want to be a little nervous. Okay. If you're too laid back, if you're too chilled, it's
a good stress.
It's a good stress, exactly. It's called challenge. Under challenge, the brainstem activates the whole brain, so you see and you hear things more clearly. The front of the brain puts information through the brain more quickly. Challenge is good. Challenge is that flow state. Lots of creative ideas, mental energy. Boy, this is fun. More energy at the end than at the beginning.
Until
it gets too much.
Yeah.
And then it's a perceptual event. You think, I can't do it. And then what happens is there's a downshifting. And then when you downshift, what happens is frontal lobes go offline. They're the part of the brain that lets you see abstractly. They're the part of the brain that lets you be creative.
Plan ahead, isn't it?
Plan ahead.
Yeah.
It's the part of the brain that lets you do sequences. I mean, what you're doing now is incredibly difficult, challenging. You're listening to me, and you're following through, and you're saying, okay, is this good? And then what's my next question? Yeah. How much time do we have? Are we getting off track? That's what the frontal lobes do. Under stress, you can't do it. And what happens is the amygdala turns on, you have a fight or flight response, and then everything's gone. It's now black and white, it's stereotypical. All you can do is read your questions. And you don't know, was this good or not? So that's the key thing.
That's autopilot. Is that what happens?
The autopilot is the challenge. Because in that point, you feel like someone else is directing the game. Everything is going well. The thought comes to your mind at the right time. The response is good. And it's building up this wholeness. You see it coming together and it's becoming clear. And so how do we get that? You need a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
Sleep repairs the brain. You need good physical activity. Physical activity increases oxygenation to the brain. You need good food. We are what we eat. You need good food in terms of what's happening in the gut. The gut is actually signaling the brain, and if you eat fast food, if you eat over-prepared food, GMOs, it actually affects what's in the gut.
It's the small brain, right?
It's the second brain.
The second brain, that's
yeah. And there's a direct neural connection between the brain and the gut. It's called the vagus nerve. Up to about 5 years ago, they thought it was the brain telling the gut what to do. Now they find 95% of the information flow is from the gut up to the brain. And it's not as though the gut is telling the brain what to do, but the gut is giving the brain lots of signals. What is it like out here? The immune system is mostly active in the gut because it's keeping you from all of the bacteria, which is negative. And when you eat bad food, the immune system can inflame the brain. And so you want to do all of these things to help this from happening. And then you want to transcend. You want to have that experience. And I'm glad you brought out the point, because the transcending is what's key, not the technique to get there. Transcendental meditation is a way to get there regularly morning and afternoon, but however you transcend is the key point.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. This relates to this question. It's just when there's something I don't want to do. For example, that situation where I think about walking up to him, and actually I didn't freeze. Actually, I just convinced myself that it was better not to. Do you know that when you try to convince yourself of something that you. And another question, maybe I should put those two together, is about being in a religious community, which I've been in for a long time and I've left it. And that was also that sort of, I convinced myself, and sometimes other people convinced me, but it happened inside of me, right? So I convinced myself to do and say and even preach something that I didn't really want. So what is that? Like you persuade yourself to do something that is not you.
Yeah. That's remember the high road, low road. The low road is the emotional tone. I haven't even talked much about the high road. The high road is where you cognitively determine things. So in terms of the other lager, which was standing there, low road response, first it was nervousness. Yeah. The high road response identified him. Yes, it's him. Look at his hair. It's a little bit longer. Look at the bodyguards. It came together. Yeah. And this experience came together with this nervousness.
Yeah.
So then what happens now, the frontal lobes take over. And you start analyzing and deciding, because that's what they do. And they start rationalizing. Oh, I don't really have to talk to him.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so probably he'll be bothered and he'll write an email.
Exactly. It's more respectful
Yes,
and so on. So this is what's constantly happening. And so see what's happened here is the low road and the high road have come together. And then the high road, the actual decision you make reflects the emotional response. Your emotional response was, I don't want to talk with him.
Yeah.
And so the high road came up with, well, it's a very good to not talk with him because of all of these reasons. And
so you get the emotion and then the higher.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So this, now again, this is positive, it's good. It's what allows me to, when I wear ties, to choose my tie. I look at my ties and the low road says, oh, take this tie.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you go, well, I wore a red tie yesterday, and it doesn't go with my suit, and the intellect would go on and on.
So
and
it's
on.
good to be able to feel those emotions.
It's very good.
Yeah.
The key thing is just to culture the low road response, so that your response meets the need of the time. And that will happen when what's in the low road response is more of that experience of your inner transcendental nature, because that is part of the world around us. See, when we're not classical beings, we're sitting a meter apart, but we're not classical beings. We're quantum mechanical beings. You know, we're actually
when you say classical, you mean like original?
Classical in terms of physics.
Oh.
We're not like, that's true, classical music. This is classical in terms of physics, like two billiard balls hitting each other.
Oh.
And what physics says is, no, we're a quantum mechanical structure. We are affecting the environment we're living in, and the environment we're living in is affecting us. So that's the reality. If you can have your attention at that quantum mechanical nature, the information will come in, and you'll respond to what's needed right now.
I'll be greater than that somehow. No.
You'll just respond. You'll know maybe it was maybe the right thing to do wasn't to talk to him. You know, that could very well be.
Yeah.
But then what will happen is you'll see it won't be that you're nervous and things like that.
Exactly. That would be nice if I just knew. No, it's better to wait.
Yeah,
That's fine. It's just I have a problem with the fear. I don't want to feel that.
And the only way to get over it is experience. You have to experience something which is much bigger than that. And to the religions, what religions are, if they're not based on an experience, they're based on intellectualization and rules and shoulds. Yeah. And what you do is you take those shoulds and you internalize them. Yeah. You internalize how you think, how you respond, what you should be saying, what you should be doing, and so on. Right. And it's a danger of any religion. It's not the fact that it's religion, it's the danger of anything that the intellect is telling you how you should be doing. Feeling. And feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the low road doesn't decide. Can you say that?
Because the intellect is so very strong. And when a thought comes up. Maybe you are not supposed to dance. Some religions say it's not good to dance. And you walk out and the sun is shining. You just want to run and jump. And so that comes to the mind. Oh, it's just so great. I want to run and jump. And then all your religious teaching says, no, it's not good to dance. It's against the Lord. And then what you do is you feel guilty. And then you go and you talk to the priest, say, I wanted to dance. I know it's the wrong thing to do. What can I do to repent and things like that? And it really messes things up because it's taking your natural desire, who you are and how you want to naturally flow, and it's completely distorting it.
And so what is that in the brain? What is that? Because it's like it's me, but it's not me. Because before I left, I had that feeling of looking over the church and like, I don't want to leave because all of these guys are my friends. But then I knew another part of me wanted to leave. So that split inside of you, which actually Christianity talks about as well, that split between what I want to do and what I'm actually doing. What is that in the brain? What decides then?
Yeah, there's an inner part of the brain. It's the very front part. It shares the spotlight of attention. It's called the anterior cingulate gyrus. This part of the brain, the anterior cingulate gyrus, is constantly moving the brain. It's also looking for error detection. Okay, what am I expecting to happen, and what is deviant from that? And part of it is cognitive error detection. Part of it is emotional. So that's in the brain, because typically we go through life without really analyzing each step. You just say, okay, I have to go, and you just walk. But you're constantly checking what you've just done to what should be. And this is the error detection part. And a very simple example, if you're listening to music and it's all female voices, if a male voice happens, you actually listen to that. Yeah. Your attention goes to it. Because
it stands out.
Exactly. It's deviant. So that's what's there in the brain. And now what's happening in religions is you're beginning to structure specific ways of responding. And this is the second thing the brain does. If we had to learn everything anew every day, we wouldn't have time to grow. So what the brain does, it chunks it, puts it into an automatic response.
Patterns?
Exactly. Yeah. And this is, for instance, dance. In dance, you actually take a sequence of steps and they become one step. Often dancers will tell you, I started my routine and then I became aware at the end. And at each point, the finishing of one step brought up the next. This is in part of the brain called the basal ganglia.
And when you do it like that, is that because it's in the back of the brain?
It's actually in the sides.
In the sides.
And it's circular. It sort of looks like this and then has a tail that goes around.
Yeah.
And it's on either side. So in the very center of the brain is the thalamus. That's your switchboard. And on either side of the thalamus, like almost earmuffs, are the basal ganglia.
So if you are not a good dancer and not good with its choreography, it's the side of the brains. It's the sides of the brain.
The sides of the brain are involved. Okay. Now what is found is the basal ganglia is also used in sequencing thought. And this is where habitual thinking comes in. And just like the way you learn dance is over and over and over and over, the way you become ritualized in how you should think and do is you hear it over and over and over and over. And when you have to decide what to do, you just click and it comes out. But what is happening, why did suddenly you change? What's happening between 12 and 25, the connections from the rest of the brain to the front of the brain gain a fatty layer. It's called myelin. And when the output fibers, connecting fibers are myelinated, the information flow is very quick back and forth. Before that, and so that means all of your perceptions and memories and thoughts and desires are being connected more to one place, the front of the brain.
It's like the brain is not developed until 25, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And the part of the brain that's not developed is the part of the brain that has a big picture, that sees consequences, plans, that can take a very complex series of actions and actually perform those actions. So that's what's beginning to develop. Also what's happening between 10 and 18, at 10, the connections between your brain were twice as thick as an adult. So your cortex was actually thicker. You had twice the number of connections. Beginning at age 10, you lose connections. And as the connections drop off, what emerges is your individuality, your sense of self. The connections that are dropping off are the ones you're not using. The connections that remain are the ones you've used. And just like when you prune a bush, it grows fuller and richer. And you think, well, this doesn't make sense. I just cut all these branches off. Look, they're there in a pile. But what you've done is you've left space for the bush to actually expand. And the finite amount of nutrition that's going to the bush can now go to the ones that you want to develop. And this is what's happening in your brain during that time. Connections are dropping off. There's physical space. The amount of resources in the brain can now really enrich and complexify what's left. And so your sense of self begins to come out. And as your sense of self begins to come out, your ability to think critically begins to come out. Critically not meaning negatively, but to ask questions.
Yeah.
And so 13, 14, 15, you started asking questions. You started, everything that you were told was right up to that point, you begin to question.
Yeah.
Parents call it the teenage years and they think it's horrible, but it's not. What is happening is the essence of who you are is beginning to emerge.
Yeah. And they look so adult. Sometimes you fall in the trap and treat them just as adults, but there's something clearly going on.
That was so well said. You fall in the trap. And it's a two-way trap because you're expecting them to do something they can't do.
Yeah.
And then you say something like, what's wrong with you? 2 years ago you could do this.
Yeah.
And why are you...
Yeah.
And then what the child is doing, because their sense of self is very fragile, it's just growing. They think, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Why can't I do it?
Yeah.
And so they push down their self-esteem and you're just going to make a big mess. But as you say, you just have to recognize where they are. Recognize that they're grappling with who they are. They're trying to understand the world. Their ability to think abstractly is growing. And so you just enter that world with them. If they come up and say, money's not important, I don't want to make a lot of money, and you've just been working really hard so they could go to college. And instead of blowing up, you say, wow, well, let's think. What could we do if we didn't have any money? And you explore that with them, because that's what they're doing. They're suddenly able to take another idea and explore it.
Yeah, actually, and that view can help you also feel compassionate towards yourself and what you did in that age, right?
Exactly.
I was just exploring and I was just...
Exactly.
All right, and I know you very soon have to go and give a lecture. So, last question to choose, because I have so many, but I'm just going to choose... Yeah, okay, I'm going to choose this one. So you talked a bit about it, but can you say, so there are rationality and irrationality. Some people are more rational than others. What is that, and how does it look in the brain, and how does it look in the world? Why is that?
Yeah. So the irrational, so-called irrational, is more the low road response, the emotional response.
But for example, me, I just feel very irrational compared to a lot of other people.
Yeah.
But that's not because I come from the low road response always, is it?
Low road isn't bad.
Oh.
Low road is only road because the low road is only low because it uses the brainstem. But what it is, it's your global emotional evaluation of the situation.
It's my global
evaluation of the situation.
Okay, global evaluation of the situation.
And it's in terms of a fundamental feeling. You came in to do the interview. You had a fundamental feeling. Were you excited? Were you happy?
Yeah. Still am.
Yeah, this is fun. And so some people can be in touch with their low road. Typically more females than males.
Yeah.
Because females, the emotional system connects with the frontal areas. So most females are able to label and able to work with emotions.
Right.
Most males, the emotional system, they still have low road and high road, but the output of the low road goes to the brainstem. They become more active-oriented. Typically, a guy won't be able to label his emotions. So you have your boyfriend, and you clearly see something's wrong. And you say, what's wrong? He'll say, nothing.
Yeah.
And you'll say, I can see something's wrong. You can tell me.
Yeah.
He says, no, I'm fine. Now, what is happening is, yes, something's wrong, but he's not able to emotionally...
He doesn't know?
He doesn't know.
Huh?
And for you, it's painfully obvious. It's so clear, and it happened at this point. And it's just that his brain is not able to pick it up. And so people have different brains. Now, what I said, by the way, about male and female brains, there's something called a bridge brain. And that's a biological woman who doesn't have access to her emotions, or a biological man who does have more access to his emotions.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
And so it's this rich tapestry of brain connections, which are giving different reflections, which make the tapestry of life.
And that comes back to like the second question or something, right?
The sun, reflector.
Are we all the same? Yeah.
Exactly. So one level, we're all the same, that we're growing, we're evolving to be who we are. But the other level, we're all different. And the great joy of life is to appreciate those differences and know that your friend may be completely different than you, and it's okay, because that's not where the level of friendship is. The level of friendship is something deeper. And so with your boyfriend, you just realize, okay, he just doesn't know what his emotions are. That's fine. And I have 3 girls and my wife. Yeah. And when my wife comes and stands in front of my computer and says, Fred, I know it's time to close the computer, and listen to her. Yeah. And really listen to her. Wow. When I get upset, I stop talking. I go down and get my power tools. And I start making something. I'm hammering away in a saw. And they know when I'm upset, they just don't talk to me. And so what you begin to do is just respect what the other person needs to do. And so some people are more emotional. And it's delightful if you have a group of 10 people. You want people like that because they're very infectious. Because that emotional response is a whole global evaluation. So the range is very valuable. Yeah. And can you then affect each other? Like when we've sat here and talked, do you then affect each other? Because I've heard that like the brain, the neurons, mirror neurons, that they affect each other. Yeah. So there are mirror neurons. This is the last question, I promise. Right, we'll go back to rationality. So what's rationality? Rationality is just the high road, the intellectual response. It is what they're most comfortable, that person is most comfortable using. We all use both, and what's important is to uphold both. And you can't be cold rational, because what you're actually doing is you're rationalizing what your heart is doing. So you have to be aware of that, and aware of this was the response, this was really what was driving what I looked at. Because you get 400 billion bits of information, you take in 2,000. I saw that on the YouTube video. Yeah. So, what are you going to look at? It's the global response that determines what you look at. And that's what you take in. So it's these two range of people, and too often it becomes dichotomized. You're either one or the other. We're all both. Was maybe a greater proportion of one or the other. And there's differences between individual peoples. And then I forgot your question. And then we can affect each other. Oh, yeah. Like the mirror thing. Mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are neat. When you watch someone else interacting with another person or object, what fires in your brain are the brain cells that will let you respond in that same way. So literally, it's monkey see, monkey do. This is how kids learn, especially up 3, 4, 5 before they have words. They literally copy what they see their parent do. And it's not intellectual learning. It's nothing they need to tell. They just watch it. And then when the situation comes in, it's a low-road response. Oh, yeah, this is how these brain circuits responded last time I saw, and that's how they act. Fred Travis, I have to ask you, when you say low-road, is that subconscious? Is that subconscious? It is subconscious because it's automatic. Okay. And this is how kids act. So if a parent yells at either the husband or wife or yells at one of the children, that's what the child's learned to do. If the parent hits one of the other children, that's what the child learns to do. And you can say, don't hit your sister. And it doesn't work. It won't matter. Yeah, it won't matter. It won't matter. No. And these mirror neurons continue. As well as adults. As well as adults. Yeah. There's more... on top of it, there's more of our intellectualization and culturalization and so on, but it's always functioning. Yeah, because if you're hurting, then I kind of feel the pain, that sort of thing. Exactly. Yeah, I talked about behavioral mirror neurons. You talked about emotional mirror neurons are there as well.
Oh.
And it's how we learn. There's, in the Vedic tradition, there's a number of things you can do to help you grow. And one of them is keep the company of the wise. And because the things that are talked about, the interactions that are done, you're actually taking them in by mirror neurons.
Yeah. So keep the company of the wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good...
Yeah, so choosing your friends are really important because you're choosing the brain circuits that you'll be using.
This is so good. This is so good. And I know you have to go because you have a lecture. So I'll just thank you so much for letting me talk to you.
My pleasure. Your questions were very thoughtful. They went very deep, very quickly.
Yeah, because I knew we didn't have so much time, so I thought I'm going to start with the loved one.
It's the most important, yeah, it really is. And your listeners would be very happy to begin there.
Yeah.
Because it's something we always experience. One thing about love, we talked about the low road response of love. Mm-hmm. What happens is, and that's actually activating something called the nucleus accumbens, which is your pleasure circuit. At that point, love knows no knowing. But then as you continue to interact with that person, what you find is behaviors become more similar. You find that you like doing the same things.
Yeah.
You find that insights are there. You find that they listen. And then there's a transition. And then it goes from that blind love to a much deeper, more longer lasting love. And it just comes through being with the person.
So that's, if it goes well, then that happens.
Yeah.
Until that point, you're not too sure, maybe.
Yeah, until that point, it doesn't matter. Love knows no knowing. You wake up and you think of the person and, oh, I'm so happy and this is great. And you're going to be late for work. Doesn't matter. I'm calling sick.
Yeah, more important than anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. And the point is it's the low road response, and it's okay if the low road can be programmed by positive things, by harmonious things, by transcending. And then you can begin to be more comfortable with that response.
Mm. All right.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you in advance for any iTunes review or feedback on my Facebook page. I am sure this is what a brilliant brain would do. If you need the answer to just one more question, like I did, you can, in this last clip, witness me asking Dr. Fred Travis what happens when you get banned from Tinder. And yeah, sometimes that happens, okay? And you still have a need to swipe. Take care of your brain, everyone. I do have a question. I just interviewed you, but I still have a question. So I recently got banned from an app called Tinder because I was making a commercial for my own yoga dating. And now I miss the app, I miss the swiping. So what is that in the brain when you miss that interruption, miss that, just pressing the button, doing like that with your fingers? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe you've never tried it in terms of social media, but maybe with something else when you get attached or addicted.
Yeah, what happens when you do an habitual action over and over, it actually quiets the mind down. If you look at, I watch baseball in the United States, and the baseball coaches often rock back and forth during the games. They don't know they're rocking. But what this repetitive motor system is doing is helping their mind be more settled, more focused. Because the part of the brain that does habitual activities, the basal ganglia that we talked about, also does sequential thinking, sequencing of thinking. So that's something about what you're missing. Here you had something that would allow your mind to settle down. But you didn't have to attend to, okay, what is my app, where do I go to? It's there. And when you have done something over and over and you expect it to be there and you don't do it, the brain actually registers that. If you give people a stimulus every second, and then you don't give them a stimulus for 1 second, the brain responds at that point where it should have been there. Because the brain is constantly setting up its understanding of what its model of what the world is like. And if there's any deviance from it, it becomes a word. That was great.
Got it.
Thank you. Other question?